Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us. If you're watching, whether you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook or wherever that may be, I see that our camera is a little fuzzy. Let me see if I can fix that real quick. Maybe. It'll catch up. But hi, good evening, everybody, and we're back. We were off last week because we had some technical issues, and so we weren't able to come online the way we wanted to. But everything's all good now, and so we're here. Our guests tonight for Bible Book Club are Jaiden and Paul, which they've been with us for basically the whole thing. But we've got Bailey Snee with us tonight too, so that's really exciting. He's going to be joining us for Bible Book Club as well. So we don't have anything in terms of announcements yet. We're still working on some projects and plans and things. And yeah, we're still very blurry. Let me see if I can do something about that and fix it. There we go. Okay, cool. Now we're visible. And if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, either way, just leave us a comment. Let us know that you're watching so that we can say hi to you. Okay, so we're back with lesson 11, and this lesson is called The Heart of a Friend. And I'm really excited for this lesson because we finally kind of got to probably one of the more poignant relationships in all of 1 Samuel, right? Mm-hmm. It's the relationship between Jonathan and David, and they're the best friends. Jonathan, the prince, the son of the king, and David, the up-and-coming, sort of rising up the ranks, about to get into a lot of trouble, David, but they kind of also get into trouble together in a way. But we're going to go over that. But ultimately, though, this is a huge example of what a friend is, and that's kind of the big focus of our lesson tonight. Is we're going to talk about friendship, the concept of friendship, like what it means to be a friend, particularly for us as Christians, particularly for us as people who follow Jesus, and we can discover some of the example here that Jonathan sets for us. In the way he behaves with David, and also how David behaves with with Jonathan. Yeah. So yeah, the heart of a friend. That's the heart that we're studying tonight. So let's get started with that. And our key verses where we're going to be. We're not going to read all 3 of these chapters. It's 1 Samuel chapter 18, 19, and 20. We're not going to read all of it. It's still a great read, so if you want to take some time to do that, if you haven't done that recently, highly recommend it that you do that. Chapters 18, 19, and 20. We're going to be reading bits and pieces and basically all of chapter 20 throughout the course of this lesson, so that's what you can expect. But our key verse tonight is 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 1, and it says, "After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself." So we're already starting to see here in this very first verse what we're going to be talking about when it comes to what real friendship is. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we get a distorted idea of friendship, and a lot of that is due to the way our society lives these days, right? The way that we've grown up, and the way that we've been immersed in the world of technology, of social media, and various other sort of cultural shifts. Yeah. Right. But we're gonna talk about social media in particular because that's kind of the thing that has taken the word friend or friendship and kind of altered it the most in the last maybe 20 years or so. So social media is huge. It's everywhere. Like many of you are literally watching this right now through Facebook, the biggest social media network in the world. Literally over 1 billion people are on Facebook right now as we speak. And whether they have accounts or they're participating or whatever, there's over 1 billion people in the world. There's 7 billion people on this earth. Think about that. 1 out of every 7 persons on this planet has a Facebook account. That's crazy. That's insane. And so this level of connectivity has completely and dramatically changed the way we view our relationships. And not to mention the pandemic. and how that has also altered the way we view our friendships and our relationships. Because if we can't congregate together as much, we can't be in the same rooms and the same spaces that we're used to, our friendships look a little different, whether it's just, when we've done like say 416 happy hour, where we're all kind of virtually in a Zoom call, where some of us may not even have like our natural backgrounds. This is the real background, but we may not have our natural backgrounds among us. Or the way we play some games socially, whether it's through Twitch or through multiplayer, online multiplayer games. Friendships are different now than perhaps we may have initially been taught or grown up in, right? And it's really amazing because there are people on Facebook, there are people on Instagram, Snapchat, and other places that they have hundreds of friends. Well, at least quote unquote friends, right? Thousands, 4,000 or 5,000 friends. But the fact is, no one can have that many real friends. I think when I was studying family life education, we were studying friendships, and I believe the number was, and don't quote me on this because I don't remember very well, but the number, it was about 200 people. That's it. That's kind of like the max that we can truly be friends with.
That's still more than I expected.
Yeah.
That seems a little daunting.
It seems daunting, but it kind of makes sense. Think about everyone in 416, right? We have about 30 or 40 like registered official members in 416, and for the most part, I believe I'm friends with all of them. But then there's also like work friends, right? And then there's school friends, and then there's family friends, and there's friends of friends even.
Sure.
That you can then be friendly with as well. And you can easily see how 200 people kind of is the sweet spot, right? But anything beyond that, you can't really sustain a meaningful friendship with. And so when you see people on Facebook or on Instagram that tout, thousands of friends, and Facebook is really the main one that considers those links friendships.
That's true.
Many of the other ones are considered followers or subscribers, but still, thousands of friends, physically impossible. And so one of the tragedies of our modern era is that because we're so caught up in these virtual friends, we kind of tend to forget what true friendship looks like. And sometimes we don't even have the opportunity to experience true friendship on a day-to-day basis, or to be that true friend on a day-to-day basis, even so now during this crazy time. So it's not the occasional like or seeing a status come up or a picture come up on a social media screen, but it's the relationship that stands through thick and thin. So what does this have to do with David? Well, we pick up this week basically right after he's killed Goliath, right? It literally in chapter 18, verses 1 through 12 is going to be our first bit of scripture that we're going to read today. It literally picks up right there. When David returns from defeating Goliath, he was returning as a hero, and he was a champion. People respected David. He wasn't considered a warrior yet, really. He wasn't even a soldier. Remember when he went and up against Goliath, he had to turn up to deliver food.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't even part of the army. But after that day, David was known everywhere. Mm-hmm. And so if he had used like a Facebook page or something, he would have had thousands of friend requests. He would have had thousands of followers and subscribers. Because David was kind of living the fairy tale life. He did the thing that needed to be done, and now he was kind of being rewarded for it. So we're going to read 1 Samuel chapter 18, verses 1 through 12. And they're on the screen for you to help you.
Right. After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. From that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return home to his family. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. Whatever mission Saul sent him on, David was so successful that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the troops, and Saul's officers as well. When the men were returning home after David had killed the Philistine, the women came out from all the towns of Israel to meet King Saul with singing and dancing, with joyful songs and with timbrels and lyres. As they danced, they sang, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands.
So already, like, there's songs being written about him, and there's parallels that we can see already to our lives today, right? When something really, really big happens, what is one of the first things that you see? Memes, right? I mean, if you saw the inauguration, what was like the big meme out of that day? It was Bernie Sanders, right? With like his mittens all crossed over, all sat in his chair. That picture appeared everywhere, and he was put in all sorts of other other scenarios, and it was really funny. I mean, I don't know about you, but my social media feed was just plastered in Bernie memes, and it was one of those things, and that's what was happening right then and there. When David finished off Goliath, the songs, the memes, it all started happening. Keep going.
Saul was very angry. This refrain displeased him greatly. They have credited David with tens of thousands, he thought, but me with only thousands. What more can he get but the kingdom? And from that time on, Saul kept a close eye on David. The next day, an evil spirit from God came forcefully on Saul. He was prophesying in his house, while David was playing the lyre, as he usually did. Saul had a spear in his hand, and he hurled it, saying to himself, I'll pin David to the wall. But David eluded him twice. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with David, but had departed from Saul.
Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with David, but had departed from Saul. That is a huge deal. This is the king. Remember, Saul is the king still. And to lose the favor of the Lord was a major, major blow to his credibility, his reputation, and his ability to be an effective leader. We already know that Saul was not an effective leader, even when God was with him, but this hurt even more so.
Well, and just quickly, I think like Saul knew it was coming. He was told it was going to happen, and now that it has, the downfall really begins.
This is really the beginning of the end for Saul.
Yeah.
As king, everything else up to this point, there were ways where he could have kind of come back a little bit. But this is really the beginning of the end for his reign. So he's already upset with David. He's very suspicious with David. And so David desperately needed someone to intercede for him. But his intercessor came from the most unlikely sources. It wasn't Samuel. It wasn't the priests. The intercessor was none other than Saul's own son, Jonathan. It wasn't the people singing his praises. It wasn't the people posting all the memes. Who had the power to intercede, but it was the one friend who loved David as himself. What can Jonathan then teach us about having the heart of a true friend? So we're going to read a little bit more before we answer that question. I'm going to read chapter 19, verses 1 through 6.
Saul told his son Jonathan and all the attendants to kill David, but Jonathan had taken a great liking to David and warned him, My father Saul is looking for a chance to kill you. Be on your guard tomorrow morning. Go into hiding and stay there. I will go out and stand with my father in the field where you are. I'll speak to him about you and will tell you what I find out. Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father and said to him, Let not the king do wrong to his servant David. He has not wronged you, and what he has done has benefited you greatly. He took his life in his hands when he killed the Philistine. The Lord won a great victory for Israel, and you saw it and were glad. Why then would you do wrong to an innocent man like David by killing him for no reason? Saul listened to Jonathan and took this oath, As surely as the Lord lives, David will not be put to death. So Jonathan called David and told him the whole conversation. He brought him to Saul, and David was with Saul as before.
1 through 6.
Sorry.
That's okay. So Janelle read a little bit more than 1 through 6. I think through 8? 7?
7.
Through 7. So just so you know that. But Saul listened to Jonathan and took this oath. This is in verse 6. As surely as the Lord lives, David will not be put to death. Throughout the course of this lesson, we're going to see a couple of oaths being taken, a couple of promises being made in the presence of the Lord, with kind of the Lord as like the the witness. So, and that's a really, really big deal, because obviously if you're going to swear an oath and you swear it on the Lord, I mean, that means a lot. That's why Jesus tells us not to do it, because it is such a powerful thing. It's such a powerful promise you're making. So Saul has now sworn to Jonathan that nothing's going to happen to David.
Mm-hmm.
What are your bets on how well he keeps that promise?
Not well.
Yeah.
I think it is interesting that, and we'll talk about this more later, but I think it's interesting, like, for a little while, Jonathan was able to sway him.
Yep.
Like, he was able to bring David back to Saul, and they were as they were before.
Yep.
And that lasted for a while. We don't know how much time, but time had gone by, and things were kind of okay.
Yeah,
so
that's true. Jonathan was already able to start sort of interceding there for David.
Mm-hmm.
So what can Jonathan teach us about having the heart of a true friend? Well, first and foremost, Jonathan's friendship for David flowed from pure motives. I want to make that clear, because Jonathan had kind of every incentive to just turn David in, or even kill him himself. Remember, Jonathan is the king's son, right? And by all accounts, he had the rightful claim to the throne. But he chooses not to. He chooses to protect David. He chooses to look after David. And why? Well, because Jonathan loved David. And that's a beautiful statement. I mean, everything that Jonathan did for David was motivated by love. If we go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, we read that Paul is teaching us that love is the ultimate motivation for everything we do. We're not going to read 1 Corinthians chapter 13, but you can look it up. But Paul teaches us that love is the ultimate motivation for everything we do. If we're being honest, we have probably befriended people for reasons other than love. Have you? I have.
Yeah.
I have. Maybe we felt sorry for them. Maybe we wanted them to feel sorry for us, or something about the friendship was beneficial. That's probably the one I'm guilty of, where like being friends with someone was just beneficial to me more than anything else. But we have also become friends with people simply because we love them, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why Jonathan befriended David. Jonathan loved David as his own soul. We know all the way in chapter 18, verse 1, right? It says that after David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. So, I mean, what else can you do? When you've become so intertwined with that person that you just love them so, and this doesn't have to be a romantic or sexual relationship, but if you get that close to somebody in a friendship, that's a true love, right? So we're going to read a little bit more here in chapter 20. This is kind of the bulk, so strap in.
Then David, it's 20, right?
Yeah, chapter 20, verses 1 through okay. All of it.
All of it. Then David fled from Naioth at Ramah and went to Jonathan and asked, "What have I done? What is my crime? How have I wronged your father that he is trying to kill me?" "Never," Jonathan replied. "You are not going to die. Look, my father doesn't do anything great or small without letting me know. Why would he hide this from me? It isn't so." But David took an oath and said, "Your father knows very well that I have found favor in your eyes, and he has said to himself, 'Jonathan must not know this, or he will be grieved.' Yet as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, there is only a step between me and death." Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you want me to do, I'll do for you." So David said, "Look, tomorrow is the new moon feast, and I am supposed to dine with the king. But let me go and hide in the field until the evening of the day after tomorrow. If your father misses me at all, tell him, 'David earnestly asked my permission to hurry to Bethlehem, his hometown, because an annual sacrifice is being made there for his whole clan.' If he says, 'Very well,' then your servant is safe. But if he loses his temper, you can be sure that he is determined to harm me. As for you, show kindness to your servant, for you have brought him into a covenant with you before the Lord. If I am guilty, then kill me yourself. Why hand me over to your father?" "Never," Jonathan said. "If I had the least inkling that my father was determined to harm you, wouldn't I tell you?" David asked, "Who will tell me if your father answers you harshly?" "Come," Jonathan said, "let's go out in the field." So they went there together.
Okay, so we're going to stop right there for a minute. I'm going to stop right there for a minute because this first part of chapter 20, we kind of established something really important. And that is kind of our next point. So we talked about how Jonathan's friendship for David flowed from pure motives. Well, here this kind of very firmly establishes that Jonathan's friendship for David involved loving David more than he loved himself. Mm-hmm. Because he was about to put together kind of a deception in a way on behalf of David in order to figure out what Saul's intentions were.
Yeah.
Right? So Jonathan could have used his father's anger to promote himself. And we're going to find out because we already know. We already know that that Saul is angry at the idea that David is rising up through the ranks the way he has been. So Jonathan could have weaponized that anger to promote himself, right? After all, like I said before, he was the firstborn of the king, and the throne rightly belongs to him. But his love for David was more important than any earthly throne. And it's obvious here because he's trying to figure out what's going on here. Like, Jonathan still kind of gives Saul, his father, the benefit of the doubt, saying, you know what, never, no way. No way is my father trying to kill you. Mm-hmm. But David says, let me tell you, he's mean, he's bad, and he's trying to get me. So they put together this idea, right? And he puts his friend's needs above his own. Jonathan puts David's needs above his own. Do we do that? Do we put our friends' needs above our own? You know, we live in a time of disposable friendships. You know, if you can have thousands of friends on Facebook or wherever, that means if one of them leaves, or if you're bored of them, then you can just unfriend them, and that's that. You still have, 3,000 others. We kind of do live in an age of disposable friendships. If your friendship costs me too much, if I disagree with you on something, I'm sure many of us have had to deal with that lately, right? Or if I'm just tired of looking at all your posts, whether it's, like political stuff or even innocuous things like Candy Crush, right?
Candy Crush.
I can just unfriend you if I'm just tired of you. It would have been in Jonathan's best interest from a human physical point of view. Mm-hmm. It was in Jonathan's best interest to throw David under the bus, to unfriend him, to turn him in, to have nothing to do with David. But he couldn't do that. He couldn't do that. He just loved him too much. Let's keep going. This is chapter 20, verses 11 through 23.
Then Jonathan said to David, "I swear by the Lord, the God of Israel, that I will surely sound out my father by this time, the day after tomorrow. If he is favorably disposed towards you, I will not send you word and let you know. Will I not send you word and let you know? But if my father intends to harm you, may the Lord deal with Jonathan be ever so severely if I do not let you know and send you away in peace. May the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. But show me unfailing kindness like the Lord's kindness, as long as I live, so that I may not be killed. And do not ever cut off your kindness from my family. Do not, even when the Lord has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth." So Jonathan made a covenant with David, the house of David, saying, "May the Lord call David's enemies to account." And Jonathan had David reaffirm his oath out of love for him, because he loved him as he loved himself. Then Jonathan said to David, "Tomorrow is the new moon feast. You will be missed, because your seat will be empty. The day after tomorrow, toward evening, go to the place where you hid when this trouble began, and wait by the stone easel. I will shoot 3 arrows to the side of it, as though I were shooting at a target. Then I will send a boy and say, 'Go find the arrows.' If I say to him, 'Look, the arrows are on this side of you, bring them here,' then come, because as surely as the Lord lives, you are safe. There is no danger. But if I say to the boy, 'Look, the arrows are beyond you,' then you must go, because the Lord has sent you away. And about the matter you and I discussed, remember the Lord is witness between you and me forever."
Okay. So here we are again. Jonathan is putting David's interests and safety above his own. An important thing to consider is that, and it's kind of our third point here, Jonathan's friendship for David involves sacrifice. And we're going to read the account of what happens, when they go to that new moon feast in just a minute. But what Jonathan's about to do is going to cost him the goodwill of his father. Plain and simple. It's going to basically eradicate any chance he had for maintaining his position, for attaining the throne, and leading the kingdom. Like this is really it for Jonathan in terms of his political and earthly power. But Jonathan was able to sacrifice for David because he recognized something his father never understood. That the throne was never his to begin with. The throne wasn't Saul's to begin with. It was the Lord's throne that he graciously let humans sit in for hundreds of years. Jonathan's relationship with David was strong because his relationship to God was stronger. And that's the important thing here. And that's the key to the heart of a friend, right? And it's the key to many of these other positive hearts that we've been discussing throughout this series. If your relationship with God is good and positive and strong, then a lot of these other hearts of friendship, hearts of courage, etc., those kind of flow from there. They flow from there. Could weak relationships with God be the reason we see so many failed relationships in the church? I think so. True friendship looks at what God has given to and gives to their friends in return, knowing no bounds of sacrifice. Let's continue and see what happens next. This is going to be 1 Samuel chapter 20, verses 24 to 34.
So David hid in the field, and when the new moon feast came, the king sat down to eat. He sat in his customary place by the wall, opposite Jonathan, and Abner sat next to Saul, but David's place was empty. Saul said nothing that day, for he thought something must have happened to David to make him ceremonially unclean. Surely he is unclean. But the next day, the second day of the month, David's place was empty again. Then Saul said to his son Jonathan, "Why hasn't the son of Jesse come to the meal either yesterday or today?" Jonathan answered, "David earnestly asked me for permission to go to Bethlehem. He said, 'Let me go because our family is observing a sacrifice in the town and my brother has ordered me to be there. If I have found favor in your eyes, let me get away to see my brothers.' That is why he has not come to the king's table." Saul's anger flared up at Jonathan, and he said to him, "You son of a perverse and rebellious woman, don't I know that you have sided with the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of the mother who bore you? As long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Now send someone to bring him to me, for he must die." "Why should he be put to death? What has he done?" Jonathan asked his father. But Saul hurled his spear at him to kill him. Then Jonathan knew that his father intended to kill David. Jonathan got up from the table in fierce anger. On that day of the feast, he did not eat because he was grieved at his father's shameful treatment of David.
So we have Saul's kind of preferred method of trying to get rid of people, just like throwing his spear at them. But he seems to be a really bad shot because David misses him 3 times, and Jonathan is just able to kind of and miss the spear as well. But there it is. There's the sacrifice that I was talking about. Jonathan brings up this point with his father. They've come up with this sort of ruse to determine what Saul's intentions are. And so first and foremost, Saul breaks his oath to his son. He breaks his oath right then and there. And then of course Jonathan is upset. He's angry. He's really mad that his dad has gone so far down this path. And he also realizes too that the sacrifice is done. He has no opportunity here to reclaim any kind of glory for his family. And he, although he did have some insurance to that front by having an oath with David to make sure that David's household doesn't do anything to Saul's household, even if Saul himself has to pay for the consequences. But let's wrap up chapter 20, and then we'll finish up here as well.
In the morning, Jonathan went out to the field for his meeting with David. He had a small boy with him, and he said to the boy, "Run and find the arrows I shoot." As the boy ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. When the boy came to the place where Jonathan's arrow had fallen, Jonathan called out after him, "Isn't the arrow beyond you?" Then he shouted, "Hurry, go quickly, don't stop." The boy picked up the arrow and returned to his mother. The boy knew nothing about all this, only Jonathan and David knew. Then Jonathan gave his weapons to the boy and said, "Go carry them back to town." After the boy had gone, David got up from the south side of the stone and bowed down before Jonathan 3 times, with his face to the ground. Then they kissed each other and wept together, but David wept the most. Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying, 'The Lord is witness between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever.'" Then David left, and Jonathan went back to the town.
So the end of chapter 20 is really tragic, really, because this is the end. This is the end of everything that kind of should have gone like better, right? This is the last time that David and Jonathan are together in any meaningful way, at least that that's been recorded in the scriptures. But I mean, their goodbyes are fairly obvious to that end, right? Jonathan is disillusioned with his father and knows that what has gone on is like it's his greatest fear, that his own father is going after his best friend. And for David, he's gonna lose his friend. He's not gonna be able to be around him anymore. He's not gonna be able to share in that joy that comes with being with your friends. And so all of this, though, all of these examples that Jonathan has set for us, the fact that his friendship for David is motivated by pure motives, that it involved loving David more than he loved himself, and then, of course, involving that sacrifice that he had to make. All of these things leave a lasting impression on David. If you go to 2 Samuel, sort of way later on, 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 26, I'm going to read that real quick. This is when Jonathan has died, has passed, and this is what David does when he learns of Jonathan's passing. He says, "I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women." Which is a really remarkable thing to say. But it was a lasting impression. It was a lasting impression on David. He never forgot his best friend, Jonathan. And he always wished for the best for him.
And then later we even know that David does fulfill his promise to any remaining family that he had.
That's true. And we didn't pull up any scriptures of that, but yes.
But you can read about it.
He does fulfill that oath, and he shows kindness to one of the few remaining descendants of Jonathan. And in fact, it brings them into the king's table and all this stuff. Not just kindness, but like lavishes all sorts of riches. Come live with him. Yeah. Basically invites him to be part of his family. So David loved Jonathan so deeply because Jonathan first loved David, and he showed him that love through action and through sacrifice. He showed David love at a time when maybe David didn't feel very loved. I mean, it got to the point, if you read in more detail in chapter 18 and 19, where he was kind of forbidden to even see his family for a while. David was just not allowed. Saul would not let him go see his family. And that's probably another reason why Saul just blew up so angrily at that new moon feast, because the excuse was that David had to go see his family for something. So David was in a position where he was not very loved. He was being kind of persecuted by by Saul, by Saul, although he would go on to be persecuted even more before everything was resolved. But Jonathan showed him love where he didn't see it. So what's kind of the point of all this, right? Admittedly, relying on a friend the way David relied on Jonathan can be really, really tough. We're not often in a position where we have to rely on our friends to that extent to protect our lives, livelihood, well-being, all those things. Mm-hmm. We're really not. And sometimes it's really hard to just even trust them with like the truth, with understanding, because we don't always have a true understanding of what our relationship with our friends are. I mean, many of us have been hurt. We've been betrayed. We've been unfriended. But thanks to God, we have someone that is like Jonathan and greater than still, because we have Jesus, of course. We have Jesus' example and Jesus' relationship with us to carry us through. Like Jonathan, Jesus protects us from our adversary. I can't say words tonight. I'm trying to speak too fast, I think. Jesus protects us from our adversary. His friendship flows from pure motives. He loves us more than he loves himself. I mean, he proved that by dying on the cross for us. He sacrificed for us, and his love leaves a lasting impression. All of the boxes are checked. All of the things of a true heart of a friend are there in Jesus for you and me. We never have to feel alone because, as Paul told his listeners on Mars Hill, our friend is not far from any one of us, as he says in Acts 17, verse 27. But we also have to remember that Jesus lives in the hearts of his people, right? Every day, people desperately needing the love and friendship of Jesus are around us, right? Are around us. And so what does that mean for us then? It means that it's not enough to just look for people who are like Jesus. We have to be that too. Mm. We have to show what true friendship looks like to other people. You may be the only Jesus that some people ever see or ever interact with. You may be the only person that can be their Jonathan. Sometimes we feel like we can make it through life without friends, but we can't. We're not designed that way. God didn't build us to be lonely. That's just not how it works. No matter how much you may try to delude yourself into thinking that. We're not designed to be lonely. And we're not designed to withhold our affections and withhold our friendships for people either. It's not a one-way street. It has to go both ways. Furthermore, we may be robbing someone of our friendship. So there may be someone who desperately needs the friendship of Jesus. And so as you offer your friendship, remember one important truth, that Jesus never leaves us. He never unfriends us. Romans chapter 8, verse 38 and 39. We'll close out here and then go into our next part. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. We have no separation from Jesus. So what's stopping you from being that friend? What's stopping you from being the Jesus or the Jonathan that somebody else needs? And if you don't have that, maybe reach out. Maybe look around and see who's willing to offer that for you. All right, it's time for our Bible book club. We've got our friends here tonight as well. We've got Paul and Jaiden. Hey guys. Oh, you're still muted. You got to unmute yourselves. There you go. And we got Bailey Snee with us as well. Hi, Bailey. Welcome.
Hello.
Well, guys, what did we think? First things first.
First impressions.
First impressions.
I really enjoyed it. I like just kind of the story. I don't know that I've vigorously studied 1 Samuel since it was done like last year in Bible, or last time in Bible, so like a really long time ago.
Yeah. That's what I said at the beginning of this series. I was like, we've done 1 Samuel in Bible like 2 or 3 times, and that's the book I'm probably most familiar with in the Bible. But in doing this and sort of studying it kind of story by story, I hadn't really had the opportunity to get as deep a look as I did back when we were doing Bible.
But anyway, continue.
But go on. I'm sorry.
But that's all for me.
Oh, okay.
I know I'm kind of jumping in this, but I think it's one of the things that stood out to me was how much Jonathan was like, no, my father would never do that to you. He promised he would never. And David's like, I'm telling you, this is the way it is. Like, I'm not even sure why that stood out to me. It was just some random thing. I was like, wow, like, and it makes sense. It's his dad, but I honestly have nowhere else to go with that except it was something that I thought was really interesting.
I think that was the part that stood out to me the most too is just like well, you know, the fact that like from our third person perspective, it would just be kind of ridiculous for him to put any stock in his dad at this point, kind of thing. But I think I think from time to time we do definitely come across those situations and those relationships in our lives where, well, for a number of things. For one, someone who's been so close and then all of a sudden struggling with morality or falling away or in this particular thing, maybe not quite in the right, or even just being torn between the two perspectives of two people really close to you. Like, no matter who's in the right, I think emotionally in the moment, that's something that's very difficult for all of us to come to terms with. And, you know, at the end of the day, maybe this is something that exemplifies, like, you know, just taking some time to, you know, put what we want. We don't want there to be any problems, but putting that feeling aside and maybe just seeing who's exemplifying like morality more, or the way Jesus would go about things, or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it also says a lot. Like, this is his father, his family. And in the church, there's plenty of times where all of a sudden you're in a position where you are one in spirit with brothers and sisters that are not like actually related to you. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that love ends up having to outweigh not the love for your family, but like the kind of the loyalties. Like, when you're one in spirit with people and you see something going on, you have to decide what you agree with and like what's happening, and base the situation off of like what you know, and then kind of choose your own way, and that may not align you with your family.
Right.
And I think for Jonathan, that was probably part of what was happening. But again, like, up to this point, he did have a very close communication with his father, and he did have sway over his father, and his father had made an oath to him. And again, we said the oaths, like, they are very strong promises. And I think it was kind of the last straw for Jonathan, because he knew that up to this point, Saul had tried to kill David several times.
Yeah.
But because he had gotten that oath out of his father, and his father had said, like, I know you like him, he's your friend, like, I know. I think it just kind of was the last piece of loyalty that he could give to his father after that.
Yeah, I think about it too, like, I think about it from that perspective, from the perspective of sort of trying to be the intermediary between a friend and a family member. But I also think about it in the sense of, like, why are you two fighting? Like, when you're caught in the middle of two people that you care about very much, and you're like, what's wrong with you both? Like figure it out. And the difficult position that Jonathan was in, where, like, he, of course, he believes David.
Yeah. But
he hadn't really, when Saul made that oath to him, he really didn't have any reason to not believe Saul either.
Yeah, like, so, surely there was a misunderstanding.
Surely there was something that we could just talk through, right, and fix. And I think that's where Jonathan was coming in on this, from that perspective. He was like, well, we can sort this out. We can talk it out. Whatever we need to do, let's just figure out where everybody's at and then go from there and find some common ground. But they never get that far. They're never able to get that far because Saul blows up so spectacularly, and even in anger tries to kill his own son. Yeah. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that's where then those things that you're saying, those that test of like loyalty versus family and friendship and all of those different forces pulling at us. Mm-hmm. That's where you had to really weigh, which are morally correct here.
And I think that's what I like the most about Jonathan is through what stories we do have about him, everything he does is motivated by his faith in God. Mm-hmm. He went in with his armor bearer to kill all those Philistines. I think it was Philistines still.
I think so, yeah.
Mostly Philistines. Because he said, maybe God will give us his victory. He was purely motivated. He was strong enough in his faith on his own to follow God no matter what. And we see that when he first talks to Saul in these chapters, because he says, David did kill the giant, but the Lord delivered this great battle, and you were happy for it. So, he tries to refocus it constantly on, this is what God wants, so this is what I'm going to do. And even in his blessing to David, he says, may the Lord be with you as he was with my father. Jonathan acknowledges the shift in power. And I think his loyalty in part goes to David because God's own loyalty.
Because Jonathan's true loyalty was with God first and foremost. Yeah. Right. I think so too. Any other first impressions? Any other thoughts?
I think it's a little bit of a testament to how good Jonathan is just by the fact that he kind of he picks David as his friend and his best friend. And we were kind of talking about motives for friendship and how Jonathan had pure motives. I don't think he was trying to get something out of that friendship, but I think that he saw something really good in David that thankfully we can see through scripture and just how awesome David was. And even when I was reading this, I was like, wow, he's pretty wise. I didn't remember that about David. He has some stuff I didn't even remember. So I just think that the fact that Jonathan was such good friends with David is a testament to his values and what he values in a friend.
Well, and I think because we've been talking a lot about loyalty, and I kind of want to piggyback off of that comment. We see Jonathan is the first one to equip David. Saul's about to send him on all these missions to try and get him killed by somebody else, so he's no longer a problem. But Jonathan's here's my robe, here's my bow, here's my sword, here's my belt. You go and you succeed. He's the only one doing that for David at this point. So I think I don't know. I think there's a discussion there about how we treat our friendships and what we do to equip each other. Because I think a lot of times we're our friendships are so emotional. We're going to talk and we're going to be there for you when something's wrong. But how do you guys, especially right now, I guess, how do you equip your friends when they're in need or when just during this time?
Yeah, it's this, this attempt at prevention. Instead of being there when something's already wrong, what are we doing as friends to help prevent something bad from happening in the first place? Do you know what I mean? Because Jonathan Jonathan does that for David, and throughout this, this bit of the story, Jonathan is doing that. He's constantly trying to prevent something worse from happening. He's not just showing up when David's already been hurt. Mm-hmm. He's trying to prevent the bad thing. So I guess that's kind of an open question.
Yeah,
you guys.
I'm curious about how we now are doing that for our friends. Has anyone experienced anything like that recently?
Are you talking during COVID times, with
COVID or right before? How have, even if you don't have an example of now, just in the past, how has somebody come along to be your friend but equipped you with skills, knowledge, tools to do something different?
Or vice versa, if you've been the one doing the equipping.
I don't know. I feel at least during this time, and it seems really small, But like just sending people a text every once in a while, being like, "Hey, how you doing? How you hanging in there? What's new?" Just kind of putting out that, "Hey, I'm still thinking about you. I still care for you. I still love you. Do you want to talk? Do you need to talk? I'm here," kind of thing. Just letting people know that they're still in the forefront of my mind. At the moment.
Yeah. No, of course. Like things are tricky right now for a lot of people, and sometimes that's all we can do. Paul, Bailey, either of you have any examples like that? Anything else you guys can share like that?
Of just friends being. Go ahead, Bailey. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Paul. I think that just like in general, giving advice is a good way to equip people, preferably from like your friends who are actually wise. And I was thinking about like a specific friend who generally, when like I'm talking things through or I'm like talking about a problem, he will like ask me questions to sort of make me think about the situation and maybe like what my motives are, or what is kind of going on there. And that helps me to kind of figure things out, I guess, or equips me in the situation and maybe gives me some insight going into it. So I think that's a good way to equip people.
Oh, absolutely. No, when I'm on the cusp of making like a big decision or trying to understand something, like the more perspectives that I can get to even like challenge the way I'm thinking usually turns out to be for the best. It usually helps me make a wiser decision. It usually helps me do something better and bigger than even what I thought I could do.
Well, and I think it's a sign. I think that's a good way to be a friend. It's a good method to use to like not just go straight into like, well, in my experience or my opinion, it's like just actually listening and asking questions to make you think further through it so that you can come to a conclusion, but with the support of somebody there. That's a good way to go about that.
So I have a question now. I have another one. Who is your oldest friend?
I'm assuming you mean like we've been friends with them for a long time, not they're like 90 years old.
Yes. Yeah.
The one I have both.
The person you've been a friend with for the longest.
That one's an easy one for me.
Okay, go for it.
That's Elijah O'Neill. I've been friends with him since like we were both like 5 or 6, so pretty long time.
So what about that friendship has, like, why has that friendship endured so much?
So I kind of thought about this in general, as far as like, I mean, I hope you're okay with me like answering it for like oldest and closest. I know that's jumping the gun a little bit.
Go for it.
Just kind of thinking through, I wrote down some reasons as I was thinking it through. And I think that it's a lot about, with Elijah and with my other friends who I've had for a long time and who are close, them putting effort into the friendship, right? And not just kind of fading away, but actually reaching out and sort of actually caring about me and putting my needs above their own, definitely. Someone who's willing to give their time and listen to what I have to say. And I also think that just kind of like the example I was giving with Jonathan, there are people who have the right priorities. And as like my biblical priorities have developed, that's something that I latch onto. The people who I want to spend time with are the people who care about what's right and have the right values. And then certainly people who have wisdom to share and who we can sharpen one another. And then obviously like people that I care about too, right? It's not all just about them caring about me, but I do genuinely care about these people.
All right, sharpening one another. And
For sure.
Yeah. I don't know, like I am having a hard time thinking of my oldest friend. Like
you can't say me because we're married.
Yeah, but we haven't, like, we weren't friends for a while before that. So I have several like really close friends who were with me and like stuck by me and equipped me. But I think the one that comes to mind right now is Heather, because she's older than me, and she like I've known her since I was 10, but she was already like a young adult. but she took an interest in me. Like she didn't brush me off. She was genuinely curious about like what I was interested in, what I was doing, thought like could see where I was talented and like would encourage me in that. Like she treated me like an individual, not like a kid. And so like not only was she someone I could look up to, but like I did feel like she was my friend. Like I wanted to talk to her. I wanted to know, like I couldn't give as much as she could because of the age difference, but like I did what I could at the age I was. And that definitely has lasted. Like we're still really close, and we still get to talk, and it not much in that sense has changed. And I think the people that that kind of do start out giving more than you can give them, who stick with you, and then as you get older you can start giving back, like what a blessing to come out of a friendship.
Right.
Because I think, and this might change the subject a little, I think we've all probably had friends where like all you do is give, and you hope that they can, like you can boost them to a point
They can grow
where
to
they
the point.
can grow to the point where they can start being okay and giving back, and it just doesn't happen. Or for some reason they decide like you're their friend when they need you, but then all of a sudden it's like, I don't need friends. I have Jesus. He's the ultimate friend, and that's all I need, and I don't need anybody else. And like, I don't know, I've had a really hard time maintaining friendships where that kind of, I'm going to call it a mood swing, kind of comes in and takes over, because it's like, yes, Jesus is the ultimate friend. He's the ultimate like comfort. But again, we're not really created to be like that, to isolate ourselves and say like, all you need is this, and I don't need you right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have experienced that, but I think that's the difference between a lasting friendship and friendships that end up being bumpy or falling apart.
I think for me, outside of family, because it's family, it's probably Nadia. She's basically a neighbor, and we actually met in college. And honestly, like from day one, we hit it off, and like we had all these interests in common, and like we still like we'll go on walks and we'll just talk and talk and talk, and like we'll talk about stuff that doesn't matter. We'll talk about really deep stuff, and just like being able to be completely real with each other, and like being able to state opinions, and no one has like an agenda or gets angry about what the other says. We can just discuss it. And that's been huge for me. Because we just listen to each other and we're like, oh, okay, well, cool. And like, we'll give either feedback or advice or what have you. So, yeah.
I'm willing to share right now, Paul, if you're not ready yet, or you can go first. It's up to you.
I got mine.
Okay.
Yeah. It's my high school group. That's my oldest friends. You know, when I think about you know, relationships that have maintained strongly that aren't blood related, it's definitely the high school group. And like I think it's those relationships have been what is it I feel like a bit of what everyone has been saying tonight, all in all, is like we kind of found each other in high school, and you know, had good times, and like there was this like kind of easiness of, you know, getting along and stuff like that. And you know, we all have our little personal things here and there, but a big thing is like that never like seriously superseded how we treated each other. We always valued each other's relationships a lot, and there's always this sincerity, there's always this simplicity, whereas opposed to, you know, we had all experienced other groups, other peoples with certain agendas or status things, or like weird reasons for treating people weird ways. It's like, no, we're gonna do this thing, we're just gonna do it. So it was a lot of awesome little things, but all in all, we've always been very sincere towards each other, and I've always valued who we were a lot, kind of thing. So.
So I've got a couple of folks, but I think for me, some of my oldest, most meaningful, closest friends that I've had for a long time, like I think about Myra, I think about Cindy, I think about people like Yesenia, Soheli, and Jonathan. I think about Kelsey. I think about people like that. A lot of girls on that list for me. But these are people that I've known for like 20 years now, or even in some cases more than that. And our friendships are such that like basically everybody on that list lives in a state or two or even 3 or 4 away from me. We do not get to see each other in person very often. If we can go by this point, we get to go like years before we see each other in person. But with those friends, we pick up where we left off, and it's as if the time has never like elapsed, even though like time has. And like we have like our updates for each other, and we know like, oh, so and so had a kid, and like now we're married, and this and that, we've got degrees and this and these other things, but like the relationship progresses in the same way. Like we can just talk about anything. We can listen to each other. If something is in need, we know who we're going to talk to first. And like it's me or me for them, and that sort of thing. Thankfully we haven't been in a position where I needed, like I was in need to the point where I needed to reach out to my friends that way. And same with them. God's been good for all of us in that regard. But we know, I'm certain if I were to need something from them, I could just go and no questions asked, right? I mean, you've seen that relationship that I've had with them, and that's like, it's just no question. And I would offer the same thing for them, and I think that's why those friendships stand the test of time for me. It's like, yeah, we're not texting every day, if we post a picture or something, it's like once every 6 months. But when it comes to need, when it comes to big developments, when it comes to, I need someone to just hear me out for a second, I know those people will listen. I know those people will come to my aid if I need them. And so that's why they're my most meaningful friends. So we are over time, but I wanted to just say we have these great examples here from Jonathan as he navigated his friendship with David, and as David was in very perilous situations. And being a friend like Jonathan is not an easy thing to do. Jonathan had to make a lot of sacrifice. He had to choose to do things in a way that were actively against his personal best interests, at least here on earth. And to focus on God instead of on all the other loyalties that were tugging at him. So that's not to say that any one of us could just easily like that be like Jonathan for every single person. But we all have the capacity to be like him. We all have the capacity to choose our friendships in that way and to choose our loyalties in that way. And that's the important thing. And that's the true heart of a friend. So that's it for us tonight. Thank you so much, everybody that was watching us. And if you're watching later on in a replay, thank you for watching them, watching at that time as well. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Jaiden, for joining us. Thank you, Bailey, for joining us as well. It's a real pleasure to have all of you guys with us. And next week, I don't know what it is. That's why I have to look in the book. Next week's lesson is the heart of a leader. The heart of a leader. We're just 2 more lessons away, and we're done with this series. The last one's pretty cool, but I'm not going to say what it is. I'm going to leave it as a surprise. But the heart of a leader next week. And Jaiden and Paul will be with us again next week. I don't know who's going to be our guest next week.
We have a couple ideas.
We have a couple ideas, so we're going to be reaching out to them pretty soon. And we'll find out who that person is. But thank you all for being with us, and have a good night. And we'll see you next time.